right? So yeah, I mean, sometimes it sounds paradoxical because I'm saying be careful and listen and be polite, and then I'm saying, you know, interrupt and step on people. It's a kind of counterpoint, right? When Bach has 2 or 3 or 4.
As you know, there are many different types of improvisation. Some are very structured, especially in the jazz area, classic jazz. In the music ensemble, a variety of improvisation is written directions without musical notation to guide people. Other types of improvisation may use symbols that are not common musical symbols. And again, I think one reason why we study this and perform it is that in many ways it frees the performer to use his or her ears more intensely. This project, which we've made as a gift to Dr. Hrabowski, is an attempt at documenting some of the many ways that faculty and students collaborate in the department. So it's a good example. Faculty and students work side by side to create something new or recreate something that's quite old, depending on the music that we're working on.
So keep in mind that the sirens are very seductive beings, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, this whole opening is a kind of seductive kind of... The composer's name is Karina Ingram. She's a freshman composition major at UMBC. And the title of the piece, it's actually a set of 3 pieces. The title of this specific piece is Parthenope. Parthenope was one of the 3 sirens from Greek mythology. So the sirens, as you may recall, trapped soldiers at Cape Pelorum. I think the most significant thing about it is that it's by a freshman composer. They're the only ones who start with nothing on the page. And it's their responsibility to then create an experience for both a performer and a listener that's going to feel aesthetically rewarding.
It's a very special opportunity I get to have, especially as a freshman, because I can kind of show what I'm capable of.
How do the notes fall together so that they actually take you someplace? How do you convey to a performer and to someone who's listening to a piece of music that we've arrived? I had heard Karina's piece for violin last semester on a composer's recital, but I also knew that we had this really interesting young euphonium player in the freshman class, David Lamotte, and I wondered if it might be possible for this project for the 2 of them to collaborate.
I think just changing it in general, start off as a solo violin piece, and to go from solo violin to euphonium is kind of a big jump, so just being able to rewrite it and reshape the piece so it still has its original content, but it's different and more unique to the instrument itself has been pretty interesting and memorable.
One of the things I said to David was, isn't it great to have the live composer in the room because they can change things. You can't ask Beethoven to make changes at this point, right? So
it challenges my own artistic ability as well as shows what my capability is as a composer. So.
The piece I chose is called Immersion by a composer named Anil Lockwood. The piece has certain associations for me, which are that when I was working in New York, there was a former percussionist named Max Newhouse, who was very important. He's considered the first solo percussionist, really. His career kind of took a turn, and he used to put a lot of sound installations in particular locations in really big cities. And he had a sound installation in New York, and it was a kind of a constant sound. It had undertones and overtones that blended in, and that kind of constant din of that sound installation reminds me of the sound of this piece.
It's immersion, and it's this very ambiance feel to the piece. You're not supposed to feel, the audience is not supposed to feel a meter.
You know, I practiced like different ways to make the gong move, but my part was just making noise and sound.
Usually one player plays marimba. In this piece, there are sections where you have 2 players playing marimba, and even a section where there are 3 players playing the marimba. So you hear this like rumbling, like almost a car driving over rumble strips on a highway. This piece has that you prepare the gongs, hang various objects so that when the gong is struck, these objects kind of clang against it. Well, the objects that the composer asks for are ping pong balls and mothballs. What was memorable for me is how much time I had to spend at Target finding ping pong balls and mothballs, hanging them from the gong in the right way so they made that clattering sound.
This is Franz Schubert's string quintet in C major for 2 cellos. The students actually chose this piece first. They asked to play it, and I agreed because it's considered a masterpiece in all the chamber music repertoire. We wanted to approach it with great care because it's such a special work to most musicians. It's a work that Schubert composed late in his life, in the last months of 1828. We can find in that work the music of that time, some of Mozart's influence, some of Beethoven's romanticism, but mostly Schubert's own and unique sensibility. In the quintet, we find all these little ingredients, and discovering how these are built in together is fascinating.
Classical music in general doesn't get a lot of exposure anywhere but the classical music community, and so it ends up being kind of really closed off from people who aren't classical musicians. I think one of the great things about music is being able to share that, and I think that's one of the things that I really want to do with chamber music is perform it in places that aren't just chamber music places.
Just beyond the fact that we have to play beautifully in tune with great sound and all the technical aspects of playing this great piece, Schubert often takes us on a journey, and that's one of the themes of his composition. Sometimes we think something is in the exposition, this little rhythm that doesn't seem that significant will become the entire development. It's a challenge in itself also.
The name of the piece is called Smile, and it's a gospel song written by Kirk Franklin. And I chose this piece because I know that this one is a favorite of Freeman Hrabowski's. And in fact, one day last year, I was walking towards the administration building. He was actually in his car, and he knew that I hadn't been well, and so he said, "Well, you know, Janice, I want you to hear something." And he said, "I always listen to this song when I'm getting down, and it just really picks me up, and this is one of my favorite things." And so when we decided to have a celebration by having a video for him, I thought that would be a great song, since I knew that was one of his favorite songs.
Helped me in my personal life because I've been going through circumstances and situations that I didn't think that would end up well. But singing this song, when we first learned it, or even now, it really helps me realize that no matter what clouds are in your life, I know that I should be grateful because I can smile, or because I know that God is working things out for me.
But at the same time, I am the director, yes? Yes. Mm-hmm. So you have to go in the direction I'm going. So make sure that if I'm going this way, that's the way you go.
Not only did this piece play on gospel stations, but it also played on secular stations. So it was the kind of piece that was universal. It was something that you could listen to because it was about smiling. Well, Freeman, I hope this makes you smile.
Jazz is a music that you can appreciate from different points of view and in different ways. It can impact you intellectually or spiritually or emotionally. It's an actual physical experience, especially when you hear a jazz ensemble. The piece we're going to do is called A Shade of Jade by Joe Henderson. It's going to feature our new jazz trumpet faculty member, Tom Williams. Joe Henderson was able to record it with a jazz ensemble. It's 1992, won the Grammy Award. So it's a Grammy Award-winning arrangement and performance. And it's a great collaboration with the other students and with myself and with Tom.
Jazz is important because it's one of the most spontaneous forms of modern music in which people who have not played together before can create during the performance and interact with each other artistically in a way that I haven't experienced with other art forms.
This one is challenging for a few reasons. One, it's fast. Two, it's fast. It's harmonically sophisticated. So it's more of a modern jazz piece, so it's something my rhythm section players can really dig into. It's something that my improvisers have to study. The other challenge is the arrangement has a lot of technical passages for my brass and winds. So it's actually a physically demanding piece.
It's great to have the opportunity to hear our faculty as professional musicians and not just in the context of the classroom, which is of course valuable, but it's always great to hear these guys as players too.
One of the great joys of playing jazz is being able to recreate the music of the masters through yourself in the present.
The souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and there shall no torment touch them. Camerata is working on the Brahms Requiem. It's a work that was composed between 1865 and 1868. It's a large-scale work. It was written for full orchestra, for chorus, for soprano soloist, for baritone soloist. We are performing it with the Handel Choir of Baltimore, conducted by Melinda O'Neill, their conductor. So it's a collaborative performance between the two organizations. Being able to do the work with Melinda O'Neill, since this is her last season, literally makes this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And frankly, the whole project has been a wonderful collaboration of people.
The dynamic that happens when you're working with a large group or any kind of group, it's a special thing. It's this certain energy that flows through everyone and into the audience and connects you. And that's why I love music so much, because it's this grand universal connection.
The work is significant in that Brahms did not choose to use the traditional Latin text. I decided to select his own text from scripture and piece together his own libretto, as it were, for the score. One of the great challenges for choral ensembles is this extra layer of text, having to negotiate pitch, rhythm, and certainly articulation and dynamics, but then this extra layer of text as well. And the text needs to be clear, it needs to be beautiful, and it needs to have meaning. And then, even for the Brahms Requiem, there's yet one more layer, the fact that the language is a foreign language. You need to make sure that each word is pronounced in a very distinct way so that the whole line of music certainly makes sense.
Yes, the title of the piece is the Third Symphony of Gustav Mahler, actually the last movement of this symphony. Mahler is a composer who really thought big, so I see lots of similarities with Dr. Hrabowski. This particular work is in 6 movements. The entire work is an hour and a half long. It's probably the longest symphony that's ever been written. We're playing the last movement, which is about 25 minutes, and in many ways it's a culmination of the other movements. In some ways, this piece, speaking of Mahler, thinking big, it's a story of creation, the world, and the final movement is subtitled What Love Tells Me. So it has a pretty deep philosophical base.
For me, I think the crucial reason that music is important is because it helps us express our humanity. A modern composer, Gilbert Galindo, has commented that humankind and art cannot function without one another. That as humans, we have the burning desire to create something, whether it be tiny or grand, it doesn't matter. But it's hardwired into us that's how we're made, that we want to create something. And some people do find outlets in other ways, but I think the arts are a wonderful outlet for our human nature to create things.
The 6th movement, What Love Tells Me, is held together by a chorale or hymn, which embodies Mahler's philosophical search for a profound attunement to the spirit of life. In this hymn, which appears in some very dramatic settings, Mahler quotes the first 9 notes of the slow movement of Beethoven's Final String Quartet, an earlier Viennese composer who came to terms with suffering by reaching out for universal love.
Yes, lots of challenges. Number one, it uses a huge orchestra, so every student in the group was on stage, and we're talking about 80 people, and of course in the Fine Arts Recital Hall, that's very cozy. And also the number of musical lines that are happening simultaneously, it's very contrapuntal, so it's a big challenge for the players to understand their role in this texture, understand who they're playing with, hear who they're playing with. Another way that's intricate is the markings are very specific. Sometimes in a phrase, each note will have 2 or 3 different indications on it. So Mahler was very precise that way.
The orchestra specifically, that's just where my passion is. So just being able to share that with 80 plus people and then perform that in front of a live audience, it enriches my life, my love, my passion, my drive.